Welcome back to the Go-Tanium show. This is part 2 of an extended interview that we had around DIY Tanium content, do it yourself, how to write your own sensors and packages, things to think about. And this is a very special interview with someone here at Tanium that is quite honestly a legend inside the company, Rory Prendergast. So join us now as we continue the conversation where we left off from part 1. A couple examples I was trying to think of as I was getting ready for the show today. We could talk about custom code all day long, but what are some things that are just some super tangible, practical things? I've thought of a few examples with some of my customers. So I've got one customer, they're a global customer. And of course, we have a Active Directory content that'll query the domain in a very graceful way without flooding domain controllers. And there's reasons for all those design choices as you learn about creating content in Tanium, but they wanted to get a region code off their endpoints because they're a global company. And there's nothing in a normal, computer profile that's going to tell you the region, but they knew their AD site name had a hyphenated naming convention and they could extract just the first part of that. So I wrote a sensor that would go into our AD query content and just pull out that one little bit for them so they could have a custom sensor for their global environment where that machine was located. Another interesting one was I've got a customer who likes to run a particular package in their environment, and they wanted to know all the machines where that package had executed and when. So I was able to parse the local action history using some clever regex. And it was really just a couple lines of code, but it would pull out those things that they wanted to see. Like, it's important for us to know all the machines that have been remediated with this package, and that means something to us in the business. And that's why the Swiss Army knife of Tanium is so important. Some examples of packages that I've seen with customers. You may be a Microsoft ATP customer where you've got this centralized global dashboard for AV type things, and you're using Defender on your Windows 10 machines. And the security analyst came to us and they said, hey, look, sometimes Defender will false positive and quarantine a valid business file for a user. And Microsoft gave us this executable to unquarantine it, but it's got to be run locally on the endpoint. Can you help us? So sure. So we created a parameterized package. They go to their ticket where it popped up, here's my file. They paste that file path into the parameter of the package and they execute it on that endpoint and it unquarantines the file. I mean, these are just super handy things that would take hours to try to remote into a user's machine, get them the executable, now type this, all that mess. The most creative one I've heard of, which is I thought this was a bit risky, but the business prop was huge on this. A customer, think about it. You're bringing in like mergers and acquisitions, and you've got all these machines just all over creation, thousands of machines with totally random computer names, different conventions. We actually had a customer recently that asked us to write a package that would rename their Windows machines to match the corporate naming standard, so they could have a nice, clean computer naming convention everywhere. Now, that's something you want to be sure you test very carefully, right? But just these are daily in the trenches IT ops type use cases, and even security use cases that you can't live without. It's just, I need X on this Y number of machines, and now you've got a platform to do it. That's why I came to Tanium. This stuff's so cool.
I think that's one of the most important things that I heard you say was the amount of code that it took to do something, right? It's, we often hear among ourselves or customers, well, it's just a few lines of code. And I think it's important to talk about, this. I don't want anyone to think that you should be cavalier and start dropping code that you picked off Stack Overflow into production, right? That's not what we're saying. But I do think that, if for a certain number of customers out there, just getting over the worry about how to get started doing scripting and automation, you have to understand that a couple things are true. One is you can do a whole lot with not much. And there's a lot of example code out there and a lot of resources to help you get started. Two is that it's really not that hard to make sure you're not testing your code in production. So we do hope that everybody, and we do encourage them to stand up a second server that's just a development server, and it's a free-for-all, right? Like you can hook some machines up. That is something that we've been saying absolutely for years. The reality is there's no place quite like production, and you're always testing in production once things hit, because it is a different world, but you have to do your best. Three is about risk. So we work in IT. Everybody listening to this show, unless for some reason somebody told you to listen to this show, we're probably all in IT in one way or another, whether we're security folks or ops folks. And I think we all kind of, we all know the score. Like sometimes you have to do things that there's an emergency situation and you have no good choices. And that's not the time to worry about, risk or anything like that. And, regarding risk, the changing the computer names one, that is a pretty scary operation because it's hard to unwind it. But again, if you're testing that stuff in a development server, you're probably doing the best that you can. And if you do it relatively slowly, for instance, if you deploy the package out so that you tell the package to wait a certain amount of time before it executes on every endpoint, you can stage these changes out in first one set of computer groups and you go really slow, and then you widen the circle out. You can be in control of all that stuff. And those are kind of best practices in terms of managing risk. Finally, about risk, I'd say that when we surveyed our customers, I was very curious to get their personal experience on risk. How many times have you damaged your own business? And it really wasn't much. And I think the reason that that's true is because people that are writing their own code know that, it's on them and they're going to do their very best to test things out. And largely people are coming out and saying, there sure is a whole lot of value here with not a ton of effort, and it absolutely outweighs the risk. IT is risky no matter which way you slice it. Everything about IT is risky. Doing HVAC work in your data center is risky. Everything's a risk. Risk of the business. You have to be able to make an acceptable risk decision based on the value that you're going to get out of it.
Yeah. So there is a bit of a fear factor that I can really mess up a lot of people really fast when you're writing code and testing it in production, right? So a couple things here to emphasize. Lab licenses for Tanium customers are free. It's included, right? You can have 2 or 3 or 4 if you need them. Just make sure that you lab your code. And even if you have a lab and a QA dev stage, however many phases you want to go through, at least have a secondary environment from prod where you can test. Now, another way we can help you over that learning curve and that fear factor is Rory wrote a class called Advanced Content for Tanium. Rory, tell us a little bit about your class and what people would learn in that.
Yeah, so I don't want to take all the credit. I wrote the class in like 2013, but it had since changed hands a couple times. Although earlier in 2020, so if you've taken the class before, earlier in 2020, I went back and we completely revamped the messaging and things that were sort of modern, more modern about Tanium. For instance, the 7.2 client, which is now the oldest supported version of the client, makes executing content a lot safer. So we took out a bunch of stuff that was, hey, watch out for this, watch out for that. So if you haven't taken the class in a long time, it's probably worth going back and doing it. Mostly what's in that class are things that we've learned sort of by, tripping over various issues over the years. It's School of Hard Knocks, and we're here to teach people, the not only the basics, but things to do and to not to do, such as the aforementioned, please don't make changes to machines and sensors. But also, here's precisely how you can pull off the package sensor combo that we talked about with a lab. Getting people's feet wet on, forcing them to write some Python and PowerShell, even if they're used to Bash or VBS, just to get people over that hump. I think a lot of it is just activation energy. So those are the kinds of things that are in the class. It's pretty valuable. And specifically for TAS users, if you use Tanium as a service, where we're hosting Tanium server for you, you're not permitted to write a sensor in TAS until you take an e-learning version of that class. And I think that's a really interesting concept. I couldn't say for sure whether I think that we should do that for all customers, but sometimes I lean that way. And I'd be curious what customers think about that. Sometimes I think that having a little bit of training as a prerequisite, might save people some time spent trying to figure out things for themselves. And while I don't want to be paternalistic about it, I do think it's worth doing for everybody.
It really is, because you think about it, not only could you screw up your own production environment, it's a hosted, cloud service. You don't want to take down the world's cloud, right, with some sensor that goes sideways or package, right? But so that's a good thing. And really all of our customers should take that training. There's we can actually have Tanium TAM, somebody like that, deliver the content to you as a training class, or you can take it at your leisure online within a web-based training type format as well. So I'm going to have a link to that in the show notes here on the YouTube channel, where you can go check out the outline for what's covered in that training. If you'd like to take that training, we would encourage you to, if you have, even if it's been a while, to go ahead and reach out to somebody on your account team, your TAM, your salesperson, and they can get you hooked up with the right connection to get that training. In that training, that's going to talk about a number of things. There are some nuances for coding in Tanium, some Windows things you probably never heard of, like WoW 64 and different things that are going to drive you crazy, a native, all this stuff. So there's some things you really need to know. There's some parameter encoding, decoding that happens with packages and sensors, things that aren't intuitive right out of the box that you really do need to take that class. So I'd encourage you to try that as you're going to do it. And there's a tons of best practices that we'll cover in there as well. And we don't want to rehash all that in today's content. We're actually going pretty long in our conversation today on purpose, because I wanted you to have a chance to meet Rory and just really have a casual, relaxed conversation about what it means to truly author content on the platform. Rory, it wouldn't be a custom content show if we didn't actually have some kind of code on the screen, some kind of demo. Could you show us I know we'll get into in the class a lot more, but could you show us just a really quick sensor demo?
Yeah, sure. Let me go ahead and do that. So this is going to be really simplistic, but I think that's okay. I think seeing is believing. So if this is all working correctly, everyone should see Tanium console. It's a test server. So if we go and ask a question, just a sort of sensors 101, so get computer name and IP address. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a sensor that's something like computer name or IP address. These are going to be really, really simplistic. Apparently these have no IP address. There they go. So what you're seeing there is the data sort of being fed in over time. And these are very slow cloud instances, like on the cheap tier, just so everybody's aware. So we're going to go into sensor and so under administration and sensors, and we're going to create our own sensor with this new sensor button. So this, I think, is what TAS customers don't see, that you can't click the new sensor button. So if you don't have that, again, reach out and to your account team and get that training, and you can get that enabled. So we're going to write the world's simplest sensor, hello. So you can give yourself a category. You can change the result type. This is actually interesting. So it allows you to do sorting and filtering. Like we know what a version string is, so we can do version comparisons. We're not going to do any of that stuff. What we're going to do is we're going to make a PowerShell sensor for Windows, and we're going to do, host, hello, Tanium. And now you can see there's a certain amount of text that you can have for a sensor. You can't make a sensor like absolutely huge. They've got to be really small. But I think this is a really important point. If you needed more space for a sensor, both PowerShell and Python are modular languages. So you can deploy your own PowerShell modules or Python packages down to client disk in a package and then load them up in a sensor. So your sensor could be very, very small. You could just be calling a function into a very complicated and well-built Python or PowerShell package. So don't let this character limit fool you. And then we're going to make a Linux sensor. So we could do bash here, and you just paste in some bash. We're going to do a Python sensor. And we're going to use the Tanium results object. So tanium.results.add, and then we're going to add hello Tanium. Now you can see there's a difference in PowerShell. It's just regular old PowerShell. Write host is something we all understand. But on Python, we have this other way to get data into the console called tanium.results. It's an object, and it's all documented in the core Python documentation. So this is a really cheesy sensor. It doesn't do much, like I said, but it should produce the same results using two different programming languages.
On the Python side, though, don't you have to import Tanium there?
Good question. So we always recommend that people do it only because if you're doing something in an IDE, it won't put the squigglies under the word Tanium. It's actually not necessary, and it happens for you automatically, but we could do it. So you could do import Tanium. Now, that being said, like this is real Python. So if you had to do import OS, anything, a whole Python standard library is available to you. Tanium's a special module. It just happens to get imported automatically for you. But I'm glad you asked that because it's not obvious. So we're going to go ahead and save this sensor. And hopefully, if I did everything correctly, it'll execute. So I'm going to ask get OS platform and hello Tanium. And that's going to get it from all the machines. And we should see data populate here. Again, apologies. This is the cheap seats, this cloud instance. And you can see here's the Windows machine. We should see the Linux machine. There we go. So we saw the same string pop out in two different programming languages. And if we were to go change that sensor code, it would be changed on the next go around. And that's sort of sensors in a nutshell. In an emergency, just a few lines of Python or Bash or PowerShell or whatever. That could be thousands of dollars a minute. So really, really important to be able to know how to write sensors if you can do it.
And that's fantastic because that's the whole value proposition of Tanium. Sometimes we get used to Tanium Core and Interact. We say, oh, it's just Interact. The real business is in the modules. But no, this is a real legit business case. I can extend this platform to do anything I need in my environment. And the really cool thing there was I was able to write cross-platform sensors and packages with one item in the, one sensor can hit any one of those OSs. You just drop the code in there. And that's phenomenal. That's absolutely phenomenal as a value prop for the whole platform.
The whole goal is if customers are already familiar with sysadmin level programming languages, why make them learn something else? There's been a movement, I think, in the broader industry to sort of move towards domain specific languages and things like that. But when admins move from job to job, they're not bringing their collection of domain specific languages with them. They're bringing their scripts. And when I first saw the ability to just write things in something I already understood, it was just magical. And it is the genius innovation of the Tanium platform, in my view.
So this has been a fantastic interview, Rory, and I know we've gone longer. We're now in the second part of this episode, this epic episode, as we talk about that theme that is very critical and passionate for a lot of our customers and for us clearly. Now, I want to talk about something, and I want to speak to the audience for just a second here. I've got to be really careful on this show, right? I'm not making announcements on behalf of the company and giving you promises and timelines and dates and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's just being transparent with you. But we do have a lot of things we're working on behind the scenes, and there's some hard problems we're trying to solve. And so from time to time on this show, we're going to talk about some things like that. And please don't interpret that as to say it's going to happen. But these are problems that we are very well aware of, problems you've communicated to us. And one of those problems is, how do we share our code between like a community repo type thing for Tanium bits of sensors and packages? And then Rory has done a lot of conversations around that. And one day we would like to have a really nice solution where you could share code between yourselves in a community way. But Rory, I know I've tried to give you all the qualifications here. So what are you able to talk about with us? Is, what's our aspiration and how can customers help us get there?
Yeah, let me just say, let me reiterate. I mean, these are worse than forward-looking statements. Neither Ashley nor I can speak on behalf of the whole company, but it is something I can speak on behalf of what customers have told us. So, when I surveyed, I think we got survey results from 80 something customers, a whole bunch of customers. One thing that was clear is most customers would like to be able to share code on some venue. And I think that there's a bunch of reasons for that. I think everybody wants an audience first and foremost. It's a very human reaction, right? I made this thing, isn't this cool? And I think there's nothing really wrong with that at all, especially if it's actually cool. But in general, like, we want to be able to have conversations with customers, continue them, and get their input on, what their feelings are on where they would wish they could share code. We've heard from a number of our very largest customers. Recently, back in January, we had a roundtable discussion, and they made their preferences known. But if you weren't one of the very few companies represented at that very small roundtable, please let us know what you think about, community features. For instance, how would you wish you could communicate with other customers if that's something you'd like to do? How would you wish you could share code? I have my opinions, but I don't want to influence anybody. These are things that customers have been talking about and asking about for a long time. And of course, in today's modern world, open source is a thing. Like, there are customers that have open source projects out there that are intended to be executed either on or against a Tanium server. So it's an interesting time. We live in interesting times in terms of software development. There's been a real democratization, and we're just interested to hear, anyone's preferences on it. I think it's probably the safest thing I could say.
Very well put. Very well put, Rory. You've saved both of our jobs by not making any forward-looking statements.
Forward-looking statements and sideways in every which way.
Yep, looking around the corner.
I mean, there's a reason why we're cagey about why Ashley and I are cagey about this topic, because as a vendor with an arbitrary code execution engine, we stand to suffer reputational harm. If something were to happen on some shared medium, and I think Tanium as a company has certainly wisely put a lot of thought into that. But at the same time, we do want to hear what customers feel they need from us.
Yeah, and also we want to protect our customers. If you have some community repo where you can exchange sensors and packages, now who owns the liability for that? Right. There's a lot, the legal things get involved, and it makes it, like legally weird. So,
a better way to put that, rather than reputational harm, if the vendor is suffering reputational harm, it is because a customer is suffering. So
right,
there is a very clear, we are concerned about that.
Yeah. So as you can tell, that's a difficult problem to solve. We enjoy tackling those difficult problems here at Tanium. Now, this has been a fantastic interview today. It's been a little relaxed and slower pace because I knew we weren't going to fit this all into a single episode. So I appreciate you sticking with us for this behind the scenes interview with Rory today over these two parts, these two episodes. In the show here below on YouTube, you'll have a number of links. Out in our community site, there are a number of little helpful posts and forum articles, things that people have written to help you as you think about best practices for writing sensors and packages. So I would encourage you to check that out. Rory and I have asked for your feedback here. How can you get that feedback to us? There's a couple ways. Go to community.tanium.com, open a forum post, and we'll see that. there's a special part and community just for Go-Tanium show episodes, or drop it anywhere in the community forum and we'll see that, and we'll be glad to have a conversation with you there. Also, talk to a member of your account team. Rory assured me as we were getting ready for this call today, he said, I would love to speak with customers. So, and so would I. We're a very customer-centric company, as you are aware. So yes, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to get on a call with you and discuss your ideas about how we can make this better. And also, I would encourage you, as you write your own sensors and packages, that you involve a team or an account team member, have someone review it with you if you're not sure. Obviously you want to test it, but then if you especially take the class, but then if you're something you're not sure about, does this really abuse the platform in some way, or does this, is it going to cause performance harm to all the endpoints out there when I run this on 40,000 endpoints? We can help you do code reviews and things like that as well. You can open a ticket, talk to your TAM account member, somebody to help as well, and we can answer questions in the forums also. I think we're kind of we don't want people posting code samples in the forums, because then we get into that liability issue we just talked about, but we'd be happy to set up a call to review those with you as well. So thank you for joining us for the show. Rory, I'll give you a chance here. Any closing thoughts as we wrap up?
Yeah, there's something I love. I've talked to so many customers, and again, if anyone wants to reach out, have your TAM find me. They know who I am. I'll come and talk to you. I don't care if you're a 200-seat dentist office. I'll talk to you about custom content all day. I'll talk to you for an hour. But something I always like to tell people who are getting started, there's a lot of sort of self-loathing and worrying about whether your code is any good, and not being quite sure what you're doing. And I just want to let everybody know that all that stuff is normal. And you have nothing at all to be ashamed about if your code if you don't feel like it's very pretty. The interesting thing, again, it's not the syntax of the code. It's not the script itself. It's that you're able to solve a business problem and walk away a hero, and nobody should be afraid of that. So as Peter, the person who invented the Tanium platform, told me, nobody cares how the sausage is made. Nobody cares how the sausage is made. Just get something done and help your business. Something that I'm quite sure is not a surprise to people who do this work is that our customers have told us it is like incredibly satisfying work. Like, of all the things, almost a solid 5 out of 5. I like this very much on average. This is something that customers really, really enjoy doing. And I hope everybody tries it out. It is a relatively addictive and fabulous way to spend your time at work.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show today, Rory. And for those of you watching along, thank you for your patience. I know this is a longer episode than normal, and we just really want to get this content out there because this is such a core value proposition of what Tanium brings to your organization, and we're happy to help make that possible. So your big takeaway today is that Tanium is more than just those modules. You can actually build your own use cases, take those things out of your script library and bring them to bear in the Tanium platform to help really make Tanium your own. And we're here to help you do that. So thanks again for joining us. I'll throw up my slide here for the closing. This is wrapping up part 2 of our DIY do-it-yourself Tanium content episode mini-series here. And that bit.ly link will take you out to the training site where you can browse down and find the advanced content class, get that outline and take that class. And hopefully we'll see you in a class soon. And as always, until next time, go Tanium.